Other architects who don't know the history of the project have commented on how far the building's set back from the main road, for instance, and fundamentally it was about maintaining the operations of council in an existing building which pretty much sat where we're standing now. So we did, I think in a very clever strategic way, design the building around it without compromising the really important sort of passive sustainable features of the building, and at the same time creating what we think is a really significant public space. So it's a sort of a honeypot for children and teenagers and mums and dads and the older generation as witnessed today. So we talk a lot about the environmental features. I'd have to say for me as an architect and for our practice, the outstanding outcome is as a community centre. I think that's where it's really, kicked a lot of goals, and it's been hugely successful. We started with a very, very ambitious sustainability agenda for this project. We really wrapped the whole architectural project around that, and we separate those ideas out as sort of passive and active ideas and systems. So the passive systems are the bits that every building should get right, really, and that's things like orientation, sun shading, the thermal performance of the building, so how well is it insulated, how does it perform in the heat and in the cool. All about minimising the amount of energy you have to put back into the building. So we work very hard to configure the building exactly north-south, again a heavily double glazed building. Then you get into the active systems that make it what people like to call it a kind of a smart building. So it's a building that has a fairly sophisticated building management system. That's a computer-based system that allows for some of the active systems to operate. And I guess the interesting ones within that are things like the photovoltaic cells, which are actually an energy collector. And I would say the most innovative sort of element of the whole project is probably the geothermal system. Just to put some numbers around it, the passive systems have an equivalent reduction in terms of CO2. I think from memory it's around 27,000 kilograms of carbon. In a sense, this is, I think, quite an interesting kind of exemplar space in that it's nicely daylit. It has the operable louvers that allow us to ventilate the building. It's in a lovely part of Perth where you get the sea breeze almost as soon as it comes in. We've taken advantage of those opportunities by having a whole system of operable louvers through the building that allow you to ventilate the building when the temperature's right outside. And this is also quite an important entry into the building. One of the important community assets that we provided was to create a very substantial basement car park so people can drive straight in and come up either through the lift or the stairs and up into the buildings. Tricia, we're standing in the thermal maze, and it's actually a subterranean space. So there's a little scoop down through here where you can see the louvers over there. That's where the air's brought in a controlled fashion. But largely it's like a cave. And for exactly the same reasons that the French say you've got to put your wine underneath the ground and in a cave to really store it properly in a very steady, stable kind of temperature. This does the same thing with this mass of rocks. And those rocks provide great thermal stability, and in summer they're much cooler than outside air. In winter they're warmer than outside air because you have to have a very high proportion of fresh air through your system. So it cools that outside air before it gets into the system. Massive savings, energy savings via that sort of process. And then in winter, probably less dramatic in Perth because it doesn't get that cold, but even in winter in Perth it can get a bit chilly outside. These stones will have a slightly higher temperature. They have a kind of a thermal mass to them, and again drawing the air through lifts the temperature, reducing the energy load on the system. So it's a very simple, foolproof system, no moving parts except for some louvers, and the rest of it is really just ancient stuff that even the Romans understood. Perth unusually has a lot of water in the ground, and it's relatively accessible, and that water's at a very stable temperature. Again, in summer we can draw that cool water out of the artesian basin, take it through the system, and again, like the rocks, it's just reducing the energy load or the changes in temperature that we're needing to make to the air, ultimately to put it into the library.
Just looking at the width of the insulation, and is that throughout the whole building?
Yeah, it's massively insulated building. So Tricia, we're now standing in the water tank zone, and it's effectively an extension of the maze, and the reason we've done that is that water, of course, has a very significant mass in its own right. So these tanks full have again, a lot of thermal mass, and so effectively they're part of that system of cooling or heating the air. So rather than just saying, oh, we've got some water, we'll store that somewhere, we've thought about how we can utilise that not just for water storage but also in terms of the thermal performance of the air conditioning system. So Trish, this is really the engine room of the whole place. It's literally the main plant area, and it's significantly servicing the geothermal system. So the geothermal system is the one that extracts water out of the basin below the building, the artesian basin, but it's pulling that relatively cool water up into the system, so it's pre-cooled effectively by the earth, and that water's coming up through this system here, and then that's run through the plant and it's extracted at a much higher temperature, and it's put back into a thing called an injection bore, using that cool water to effectively supplement the energy costs of keeping the water cool, and then pumping that hot water back into the ground, and then the ground will over time cool that down, so it mixes back into the system.
If you're looking for cost-effective ways to bring your energy bill down, one of the cheapest and best things you can do is get your insulation sorted out. Insulation is one of those fantastic double action systems that keeps your house warmer in winter and cooler in summer. It also means your heating and cooling will run more efficiently when they're on. It's absolutely a no-brainer. So where do we start? Well, we start up here, of course. Insulating the roof keeps the sun's heat at bay and is a great first step. It's also generally cheaper and more effective to install in the roof than in the walls. If you're in a cooler climate, think about floor insulation. If you're in a warmer climate and have raised floors, well, don't even bother, because that'll provide you with natural airflow. Make sure your insulation is R rated. That's a little bit less exciting than it sounds, but if you choose the maximum R value recommended for the climate you live in, you'll get the best value for your dollar. Windows are a big problem when it comes to heat transfer, but you've got a few options here. The most effective option is double glazing, with argon gas in between the layers. But honestly, that's usually too expensive when you're retrofitting an existing building. Short of that, you can block out heat with reflective blinds, curtains, or exterior awnings. You can Velcro a reflective heat shield to the inside of your windows. They block out heat and don't destroy the view. Or you can create a do-it-yourself double glazing effect using double-sided sticky tape, some plastic wrap, and believe it or not, a hairdryer. There's a lot of effective and cheap options to keep an eye out for, and for most community centres, finding the most cost-effective solution is a must. Remember to ensure it's safe, so have your installation installed by an experienced and reputable installer. Visit our website to learn more.